The night was unusually quiet in Willow Creek, a small farming town nestled between rolling hills and dense forests. Owen Harper sat on the porch of his modest home, sipping coffee as he gazed up at the star-speckled sky. At 28, Owen had spent most of his life fixing tractors, plows, and anything else that broke down around the farm. Life here was predictable, calm, even, but tonight felt different. There was an odd stillness in the air, like the world itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, a streak of green light tore across the heavens, leaving a fiery trail behind it. It moved faster than any shooting star Owen had ever seen, and before he could blink, it disappeared over the horizon with a faint rumble. For a moment, everything went silent again, as if the universe had exhaled. Then came the sound, a deep, thunderous boom that rattled the windows of his house. Owen set his mud down and stood up, squinting toward the woods where the light had vanished. His heart raced with curiosity and unease. Whatever it was, it hadn't been natural. Grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, Owen climbed into his old pickup truck and headed toward the forest. As he drove along the dirt road leading to the edge of the woods, he noticed scorch marks on the trees and patches of flattened grass. Something big, and likely dangerous, had landed nearby. Parking the truck, Owen stepped out and switched on his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing broken branches and disturbed soil. He followed the trail deeper into the woods until he reached a clearing. And there, partially buried in the ground, was something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't a meteorite or a plane crash. It was a ship. Sleek and metallic, it shimmered faintly under the moonlight, its surface pulsating with soft, glowing veins of energy. Owen froze, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. This wasn't Earth technology. It couldn't be. Before he could decide whether to run or investigate further, a hatch on the side of the craft hissed open. A figure emerged, stepping cautiously onto the damp earth. Owen instinctively raised his flashlight, illuminating the stranger. She was no taller than 3 feet, her petite frame clad in armor that seemed alive, shifting colors like oil on water. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, with faint markings that glowed faintly blue. She had large, almond-shaped eyes that reflected the light, giving her an otherworldly appearance. In one hand, she held a weapon, a sleek device that hummed softly, though she didn't point it at him. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Owen's throat tightened as he tried to find words. "Who? What are you?" he managed to stammer. The creature tilted her head slightly, studying him with an intensity that made Owen feel both exposed and insignificant. Finally, she spoke, or rather, her voice echoed inside his mind, clear and commanding despite the lack of sound. "I am Caliph," she said, her tone firm yet devoid of hostility. "Protector of my people." Owen blinked, unsure if he'd imagined the voice. "You're not from here, are you?" Caliph ignored his question. Instead, she took a step closer, her gaze never wavering. "You are human," she stated, more to herself than to him. "And you are mine." "Yours?" Owen repeated, confusion mingling with alarm. "What do you mean, mine?" Without answering, Caliph turned back to her ship, inspecting the damage. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and parts of the hull were cracked and smoking. Whatever had brought her to Earth, it hadn't been smooth sailing. Owen hesitated, torn between running for safety and helping this strange visitor. Curiosity won out. Slowly, he approached her, keeping a cautious distance. "Can I help?" he asked, gesturing to the wrecked vessel. Caliph glanced at him, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she nodded once. "Your assistance may prove useful," she admitted, though her tone suggested she didn't fully trust him. Over the next hour, Owen did what he could to assist Caliph. Using tools from his truck, he helped stabilize some of the damaged components, while Caliph worked on repairing the ship's internal systems. Despite their size difference, they fell into an uneasy rhythm, each focused on the task at hand. As they worked, Owen couldn't shake the feeling that Caliph was watching him, not just physically, but somehow feeling him. Every so often, he caught her staring, her glowing eyes piercing through him like she was reading his thoughts. When he finally mustered the courage to ask about it, she simply replied, "Your resonance is strong. You will understand soon enough." By dawn, the immediate repairs were complete, though the ship was far from operational. Exhausted but intrigued, Owen leaned against a tree, watching as Caliph surveyed her work. So he began hesitantly, "What happens now?" Caliph turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Now," she said, "we wait. But know this, Owen Harper, you have been chosen. Whether you wish it or not, your path is tied to mine." With those cryptic words, she returned to her ship, leaving Owen standing alone in the clearing, his mind racing with questions he couldn't begin to answer. The days following Caliph's arrival passed in a blur for Owen. Each morning, he would wake up half expecting the events of the previous night to have been nothing more than a vivid dream. But when he stepped outside, there it was, the sleek alien craft nestled among the trees, its glowing veins pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. And then there was Caliph herself, standing guard near the ship as if daring anyone, or anything, to approach. At first, their interactions were awkward and constrained. Caliph rarely spoke unless necessary, preferring instead to communicate through subtle gestures or brief commands projected into Owen's mind. Her presence was intimidating despite her small stature. Every movement she made radiated precision and purpose. Yet beneath her stoic exterior, Owen sensed something else, a quiet determination, perhaps even loneliness. One afternoon, while they worked on repairing the damaged engine core of Caliph's ship, Owen decided to break the silence. So, he began cautiously, tightening a bolt with his wrench. "You said I'm chosen. What exactly does that mean?" Caliph paused mid-task, her hands hovering over a panel of intricate circuitry. For a moment, Owen thought she might ignore him altogether. Then, slowly, she turned to face him. Her large, luminous eyes seemed to peer straight through him, making his skin prickle. "It means you are compatible," she replied after a long pause. Her voice echoed softly in his mind, carrying an undertone of finality. "Among my people, compatibility is not merely physical but emotional and energetic. You resonate with me." Owen frowned, scratching the back of his neck. "Resonate? Like vibes or something?" "In a way," Caliph said. She reached out and touched his wrist lightly, causing a jolt of warmth to spread through his arm. "Your energy aligns with mine. It allows us to connect without words. Few humans possess such resonance." Owen pulled his hand away instinctively, startled by the sensation. "Okay, that's weird and kind of invasive." Caliph tilted her head, studying him curiously. "Invasive? No, necessary. Without this bond, communication would be impossible. Your species lacks the ability to perceive emotions as we do." "Well, maybe we're better off that way," Owen muttered under his breath. He returned to tinkering with the engine, trying to focus on the task at hand rather than the strange tingling sensation still lingering in his fingertips. Despite his unease, Owen couldn't deny that working alongside Caliph had begun to feel almost natural. Over time, they developed a rhythm, each anticipating the other's needs without speaking. Caliph taught Owen how to identify critical components within her advanced technology, patiently explaining their functions in terms he could understand. In return, Owen shared his knowledge of Earth mechanics, improvising solutions using tools and materials scavenged from his workshop. Their partnership wasn't without friction, however. Caliph's perfectionism often clashed with Owen's practical approach. One evening, as they debated the best way to stabilize the ship's power supply, tempers flared. "This method is inefficient," Caliph snapped, gesturing sharply at the makeshift capacitor Owen had assembled. "It will fail under stress. And your perfect solution requires parts I don't have." Owen shot back, throwing down his screwdriver. "Look, I'm doing the best I can here, okay? Maybe try meeting me halfway." Caliph stared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, Owen thought she might retaliate, perhaps even use one of her glowing weapons, but then her expression softened ever so slightly. "Very well," she said finally, picking up the capacitor. "We adapt. Survival depends on flexibility." That moment marked a turning point in their relationship. Slowly but surely, Caliph began to lower her defenses, revealing glimpses of vulnerability beneath her warrior facade. On one occasion, Owen caught her staring at the stars, her usual confidence replaced by a look of longing. When he asked what troubled her, she admitted quietly, "I left my home to protect those who cannot fight for themselves. But now, I am stranded, and they may suffer because of it." Her words struck a chord deep within Owen. Growing up in Willow Creek, he'd always felt like an outsider, someone destined to live a quiet, unremarkable life. Yet here he was, standing beside an alien warrior whose very existence defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. If Caliph could carry the weight of her world on her shoulders, surely he could handle a little discomfort. As their bond grew stronger, so too did the sense that danger loomed nearby. Strange occurrences began to plague the area. Livestock disappearing overnight, eerie shadows flickering at the edge of Owen's property, and an unsettling feeling of being watched. One night, unable to sleep, Owen grabbed a flashlight and ventured outside to investigate. What he found chilled him to the bone. A pair of glowing red eyes peered at him from the darkness beyond the tree line. They blinked once, then vanished without a sound. Heart pounding, Owen rushed back inside and woke Caliph, recounting what he'd seen. To his surprise, she didn't dismiss his concerns. Instead, she armed herself with one of her weapons and scanned the perimeter of the property. Though they found no immediate threat, Caliph's demeanor shifted noticeably afterward. She became more vigilant, spending less time repairing the ship and more time patrolling the area. "They found me," she murmured one evening as they sat together under the stars. Her tone was grim, yet resigned. "The hunters will come soon." "Who are these hunters?" Owen asked, dread coiling in his stomach. "Rogue Valari," Caliph explained. "Exiles who seek to exploit weaker species for power. They see me as a traitor because I refuse to join their cause." Owen swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of the situation. These weren't just random threats. They were enemies capable of destroying entire worlds. And now, thanks to him, Caliph was stuck on Earth, vulnerable and exposed. "I won't let them hurt you," he said firmly, though he wasn't sure how much weight his promise carried. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Caliph regarded him silently, her glowing eyes reflecting the flicker of nearby fireflies. For the first time since their meeting, a hint of a smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "Together," she echoed softly. "Perhaps that is why you were chosen after all." Though neither of them knew what the future held, one thing was certain. Their fates were intertwined, bound by a connection neither fully understood, but both were beginning to trust. As the days stretched into weeks, Owen and Caliph prepared for the inevitable confrontation, drawing strength from their growing bond, and the unspoken promise to protect each other, no matter the cost. The tension between Owen and Caliph grew thicker with each passing day. The looming threat of the rogue Valari hunters weighed heavily on both of them, though neither spoke about it openly. Instead, they focused on preparing for whatever might come next, repairing the ship, fortifying Owen's property, and training for combat scenarios that Caliph insisted were necessary. Owen wasn't a fighter by nature. He was more comfortable under the hood of a tractor than holding a weapon, but Caliph had other plans. One afternoon, she led him into the woods, her glowing eyes scanning their surroundings as if expecting trouble at any moment. "You must learn to defend yourself," she said firmly, handing him a small device that hummed softly in his palm. It resembled one of her weapons but was simpler, almost like a child's toy compared to the advanced arsenal she carried. "What is this?" Owen asked, turning the object over in his hands. "A pulse emitter," Caliph explained. "It will incapacitate an enemy temporarily. Use it wisely. Owen frowned, glancing down at the harmless-looking gadget. And what exactly am I supposed to do with it? Caliph crossed her arms, her expression stern. Survive. If the hunters find us, they will not hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way, including you. Her words sent a chill down Owen's spine, but he nodded reluctantly. Over the next few hours, Caliph drilled him relentlessly, teaching him how to aim, fire, and move strategically while avoiding detection. At first, Owen struggled, fumbling with the device and stumbling over tree roots. But Caliph was patient, or at least as patient as her no-nonsense personality allowed. Focus, she barked when Owen missed yet another target. Your hesitation makes you vulnerable. It's not exactly easy when I'm trying not to trip over my own feet. Owen shot back, frustration bubbling to the surface. Caliph sighed, lowering her weapon. You are capable of more than you believe, Owen Harper. Trust yourself. Her tone softened slightly, catching Owen off guard. For all her intensity, there were moments when Caliph's humanity, or whatever passed for it among her people, shone through. It reminded him that despite her warrior exterior, she too carried burdens far greater than he could imagine. As the days turned into weeks, strange occurrences around Willow Creek became impossible to ignore. Crops began wilting overnight, drained of life as if some unseen force had sucked the energy from them. Livestock disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only eerie silence. Even the townsfolk started whispering about shadowy figures spotted near the edge of the forest, though no one dared investigate. One evening, as Owen sat on his porch watching the sunset, Caliph joined him, her usual vigilance replaced by something resembling calm. They sat in companionable silence until Owen finally broke it. "Do you think they're close?" he asked quietly, nodding toward the woods. Caliph didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was low and measured. "Yes. They watch. They wait." "For what?" "For a weakness. A mistake." She glanced at him briefly before adding, "For me." Owen clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. "Why does everything always come back to you? Why can't they just leave us alone?" "They cannot," Caliph replied simply. "To them, I represent defiance, a rejection of their ideals. My survival proves that change is possible. That terrifies them." Her words hung heavy in the air, casting a somber mood over the otherwise peaceful evening. Owen wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but deep down, he knew she was right. These hunters weren't ordinary enemies. They were relentless, driven by a twisted sense of purpose that left no room for mercy. The attack came on a moonless night, cloaked in darkness so thick it felt suffocating. Owen woke suddenly to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. Heart racing, he grabbed the pulse emitter Caliph had given him and crept out of bed. Peering over the railing, he saw shadows moving swiftly through his living room. 3 figures clad in dark, jagged armor that seemed to absorb the light around them. Before Owen could react, Caliph appeared beside him, her weapon already drawn. "Stay behind me," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding below. The hunters moved with unnatural speed, their movements fluid and predatory. As they ascended the stairs, Caliph stepped forward, firing a burst of energy that sent one of them sprawling backward. The others hesitated for only a moment before lunging at her, their claws glinting menacingly in the dim light. Owen watched in awe and terror as Caliph fought with a grace and ferocity that defied her small size. She dodged, parried, and struck with precision, her every move calculated to exploit her opponent's weaknesses. Yet even she couldn't hold off 3 attackers indefinitely. When one of the hunters broke past her defenses and lunged toward Owen, instinct took over. Raising the pulse emitter, he fired blindly, hitting the creature square in the chest. It let out a guttural scream before collapsing to the ground, twitching violently. Caliph spared him a quick glance, her expression unreadable. Then, with renewed determination, she turned her attention back to the remaining hunters. Together, they managed to drive the invaders out of the house and into the woods, where Caliph unleashed a final devastating blast that sent them fleeing into the night. Breathing heavily, Owen leaned against the wall, adrenaline coursing through his veins. His hands trembled as he stared at the pulse emitter, still warm from use. "Did we win?" he asked hoarsely. "For now," Caliph replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But they will return. And next time, they may bring reinforcements." Owen nodded grimly, knowing she was right. The hunters wouldn't stop until they achieved their goal, whatever that might be. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Owen realized something important. He wasn't afraid anymore. Not completely, anyway. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on, with Caliph by his side. Over the following days, Caliph became even more vigilant, rarely leaving Owen's side. She taught him additional combat techniques, showed him how to set traps using materials scavenged from his workshop, and drilled him on emergency protocols. Despite the constant danger, Owen found himself growing closer to her, their shared experiences forging a bond stronger than either of them had anticipated. Yet amidst the preparations, a question lingered in Owen's mind, one he couldn't shake. "Issy." Owen blinked, stunned by the revelation. "Wait, you're telling me I'm some kind of cosmic matchmaker? That's insane." Caliph chuckled dryly, the sound surprising him. "Perhaps, but insanity often walks hand in hand with fate." Despite the gravity of her words, Owen found himself smiling faintly. "Well, if I'm supposed to save the galaxy, I hope whoever wrote this prophecy included a manual." His attempt at humor earned him a raised eyebrow from Caliph, though the corners of her mouth twitched upward ever so slightly. "If only it were that simple," she murmured. As the days passed, Owen wrestled with the implications of Caliph's revelations. On one hand, the idea of being tied to a galactic prophecy felt overwhelming, almost absurd. On the other hand, the growing bond between them was undeniable. Every interaction seemed to deepen their connection, whether it was working side by side on repairs, strategizing defenses, or simply sharing quiet moments under the stars. Yet Owen couldn't ignore the nagging doubt gnawing at the edges of his mind. Was he truly meant for this? Could he live up to the expectations placed upon him? Or was he destined to fail, dragging Caliph down with him? One night, unable to sleep, Owen wandered outside and found Caliph standing near the edge of the woods, gazing up at the sky. Her armor shimmered faintly in the moonlight, and for a moment, she looked less like a warrior and more like a guardian, a sentinel watching over a fragile world. "You should rest," she said without turning around, sensing his approach. "So should you," Owen countered, stepping beside her. "You've been pushing yourself too hard lately." "I have much to protect," she replied simply. "Rest will come when the threat has passed." Owen sighed, knowing better than to argue. Instead, he changed the subject. "Do you ever miss it? Your home, I mean." Caliph's shoulders stiffened slightly, but she didn't pull away. "Sometimes," she admitted, "not the battles or the bloodshed, but the sense of belonging. Here, I am alone." "You're not alone," Owen said firmly, meeting her gaze. Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the barrier she kept between them cracked open just wide enough for Owen to glimpse the person beneath, the one who yearned for connection as much as anyone else. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." Before Owen could respond, a distant rustling caught their attention. Both turned sharply toward the woods, senses on high alert. The hunters hadn't returned since the last attack, but neither had let their guard down completely. "It's probably nothing," Owen muttered, though his grip tightened on the pulse emitter holstered at his side. "Possibly," Caliph agreed, her weapon already drawn. "But we cannot afford complacency." Together, they scanned the tree line, waiting for any sign of movement. After several minutes of silence, Caliph relaxed slightly, lowering her weapon. "False alarm," she said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. As they walked back toward the house, Owen glanced at Caliph, his resolve strengthening. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever secrets the universe still held, he knew one thing for certain. He wouldn't let her face them alone. Fate or no fate, prophecy or coincidence, their paths were intertwined now, and he intended to honor that bond, no matter the cost. Underneath the vast expanse of stars, Owen Harper made a silent promise to himself and to Caliph. From this point forward, he would fight not just for survival, but for something greater, a future where neither of them had to stand alone ever again. The days leading up to the next confrontation with the rogue Valeri hunters were a blur of preparation and tension. Owen had never felt so alive, or so terrified. Every waking moment was spent either fortifying their defenses, practicing combat techniques, or strategizing with Caliph. Yet, despite the constant danger looming over them, Owen couldn't help but feel a strange sense of purpose growing within him. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just fixing machines or tending to crops. He was part of something bigger, something that mattered. One afternoon, as they worked together in the workshop, Owen noticed Caliph staring intently at a map of Willow Creek spread out on the table. Her glowing eyes traced various routes through the town and surrounding woods, her expression unreadable. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. Caliph didn't look up immediately. When she finally did, her gaze met his with an intensity that made him straighten unconsciously. "We cannot keep them away forever," she said bluntly. "They will come again, stronger and more numerous. And when they do, innocent lives may be lost." Owen frowned, leaning closer to study the map. "You're saying we need to draw them away from here, lure them somewhere else?" "Precisely," Caliph replied. "But not alone. We must use the resources available to us, the people of this town." Owen blinked, taken aback. "Are you serious? These are farmers and shopkeepers, not soldiers. They don't stand a chance against your people." "They won't have to fight directly," Caliph explained patiently. "I can teach them how to set traps, create diversions, and protect themselves. Together, we can turn Willow Creek into a fortress, one the hunters won't easily penetrate." Owen hesitated, torn between admiration for Caliph's strategic mind and concern for the townsfolk. "Even if we manage all that, what happens afterward? Once the hunters realize they've been tricked, they'll retaliate. People could get hurt, or worse." Caliph placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle despite her small size. "There is always risk in war, Owen, but staying silent and passive carries its own dangers. If we act now, while we still have the advantage of surprise, we might save countless lives, including theirs." Her words resonated deeply with Owen. He knew she was right, though the thought of involving others in their conflict weighed heavily on him. Still, he couldn't deny that Caliph's plan made sense. The hunters wouldn't stop until they achieved their goal, and hiding wouldn't solve anything. Over the next few days, Owen and Caliph began reaching out to the townspeople, starting with those who already suspected something unusual was happening. At first, reactions ranged from skepticism to outright disbelief. After all, how could anyone expect ordinary humans to believe in alien warriors and intergalactic threats? But Caliph proved persuasive, using Owen as a translator, and occasionally projecting images into their minds to demonstrate her abilities. She managed to convince several key individuals of the gravity of the situation. Slowly but surely, word spread throughout Willow Creek, drawing volunteers eager to help defend their home. Among those who stepped forward was Mrs. Hargrove, the elderly owner of the local hardware store. Though frail and barely 5 feet tall herself, she insisted on contributing by teaching everyone how to craft makeshift weapons using materials from her shop. Then there was Jake Thompson, a burly mechanic whose love for action movies inspired him to take charge of setting booby traps around the town perimeter. Even young Tommy Briggs, a mischievous teenager known for skipping school, offered his services as a scout, claiming his familiarity with the woods gave him an edge. As the community rallied together, Owen found himself marveling at the resilience and ingenuity of his neighbors. What had once seemed like an insurmountable challenge suddenly felt achievable, not because of any single person's strength, but because of their collective determination. Caliph, too, seemed impressed by humanity's adaptability. One evening, as they surveyed the newly reinforced defenses, she turned to Owen with a rare smile. "Your people are remarkable," she said softly. "Fragile, yes, but also resourceful and courageous. Perhaps that is why the resonance chose you." Owen chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, don't let it go to my head. I'm still just a guy who fixes tractors." "And yet," Caliph countered, her tone teasing, "you inspire others to follow you. That is no small feat." Before Owen could respond, a distant rumble echoed through the night air. Both froze, exchanging a glance filled with unspoken understanding. The hunters were coming. When the attack finally came, it was swift and brutal. The rogue Valaride descended upon Willow Creek under cover of darkness, their jagged forms cutting through the shadows like blades. They moved silently, targeting isolated homes and barns in an attempt to sow chaos and fear. But this time, the townsfolk were ready. As the hunters approached, hidden tripwires triggered flares, and noisemakers designed to disorient them. Armed with pulse emitters provided by Caliph, groups of volunteers ambushed the invaders, forcing them to retreat temporarily. At the heart of the battle stood Owen and Caliph, coordinating efforts and striking at the hunters' weak points. Owen fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed, channeling weeks of training into every move. Beside him, Caliph was a whirlwind of precision and power, her weapon glowing brighter with each strike. Despite their best efforts, however, the hunters proved relentless. One by one, their numbers dwindled, overwhelmed by the sheer force of the attackers. Just as hope began to falter, Owen remembered something Caliph had taught him during their training sessions: emotional resonance. Closing his eyes, Owen focused on the bond he shared with Caliph, the connection that transcended words and logic. He reached out mentally, pouring every ounce of trust and determination he felt into the link between them. Almost instantly, he sensed Caliph's presence flare in response, her energy amplifying his own. Together, they unleashed a burst of synchronized energy that sent shockwaves rippling outward. The hunters staggered, momentarily blinded and disoriented. Seizing the opportunity, Owen and Caliph led a final counterattack, driving the invaders back into the woods. When the dust settled, silence returned to Willow Creek. Exhausted but victorious, Owen collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily as adrenaline coursed through his veins. Around him, townsfolk cheered and embraced, celebrating their hard-won triumph. Caliph knelt beside him, her expression softening as she extended a hand to help him up. "You did well," she said simply, pride evident in her voice. Owen accepted her hand, pulling himself to his feet. "We did well," he corrected, gesturing toward the crowd of grateful faces gathered nearby. "This wasn't just me, or you. It was all of us." Caliph nodded, her glowing eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight. "Perhaps that is the true power of your species, not individual strength, but unity. You have shown me that even the smallest light can shine brightly when joined with others." As dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden rays across the battered but resilient town, Owen realized something profound. In defending Willow Creek, he hadn't just protected his home. He'd discovered a new kind of family, a group of imperfect, ordinary people who, when faced with extraordinary challenges, rose above themselves to become something greater. And standing beside Caliph, he knew they weren't done yet. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever battles remained unfought, they would face them together, not as lone warriors, but as part of something far bigger than either of them could have imagined. The victory at Willow Creek was bittersweet. Though the townsfolk had successfully repelled the rogue Valeri hunters, the cost of their triumph weighed heavily on everyone. Several homes had been damaged in the attack, crops destroyed, and a few volunteers suffered minor injuries while defending the town. But beyond the physical toll, there was an emotional one, a lingering sense of unease that settled over the community like a thick fog. For Owen, the aftermath of the battle brought both pride and guilt. He couldn't shake the image of Mrs. Hargrove limping back to her shop after being caught in the crossfire, or Jake Thompson clutching his arm where a hunter's claw had grazed him. These were people who had trusted him, and Caliph, to protect them, yet they had still gotten hurt. It gnawed at him, making sleep elusive and quiet moments unbearable. Caliph, too, seemed burdened by what had happened. She spent hours alone near her ship, inspecting the damage inflicted during the fight. The hull was scorched in places, and several critical systems remained offline. Without proper repairs, it was clear she wouldn't be leaving Earth anytime soon. Owen found her one evening hunched over a panel of glowing circuitry, her small frame silhouetted against the fading light of dusk. "You okay?" he asked cautiously, approaching her from behind. Caliph didn't turn around immediately. When she finally did, her expression was unreadable, though Owen thought he detected a flicker of sadness in her luminous eyes. "No," she admitted quietly. "I failed." "Failed how?" Owen replied, sitting down beside her. "We drove the hunters away. That's not failure. It is if my actions put innocent lives at risk." Caliph countered sharply. "This conflict is mine to bear, not theirs. Yet because of me, your people have suffered." Owen sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, I get it. You feel responsible. But blaming yourself isn't going to fix anything. Besides, the hunters would have come here eventually anyway. At least this way, we were ready." Caliph stared at him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "Perhaps you're right." Still, she trailed off, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "I cannot stay here indefinitely. Each day I remain, the greater the danger becomes, not just for you, but for all of humanity." Her words hit Owen like a punch to the gut. He'd known deep down that Caliph wouldn't stay forever, but hearing her say it aloud made it painfully real. "So what happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I must repair my ship and leave," she said firmly. "But first, I need to ensure the hunters won't return. Not easily, at least." "How do you plan to do that?" Caliph hesitated, as if weighing whether to share her thoughts. Finally, she spoke. "There is a failsafe within my ship, a self-destruct mechanism designed to prevent unauthorized access. If activated, it will create a barrier around this area, rendering it inaccessible to any Valeri technology." Owen's eyes widened in alarm. "Wait, you're talking about blowing up your ship? That's insane." "It is necessary," Caliph insisted. "Without the ship, the hunters lose their primary means of tracking me, and without access to this region, they cannot harm anyone here." "But what about you?" Owen pressed, his voice rising. "If you destroy your ship, how will you get home?" Caliph's silence spoke volumes. After a pause, she said softly, "I may never return home." The weight of her admission hung heavy in the air between them. Owen felt anger bubbling inside him, not at Caliph, but at the unfairness of it all. Why should she have to sacrifice everything for a war she didn't ask for? For people she barely knew. "No," he said finally, shaking his head. "There has to be another way. We can figure something out, together." Caliph smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "You truly are remarkable, Owen Harper. Few would offer such loyalty to someone like me." "Well, maybe I'm tired of watching people I care about walk away," Owen shot back, his tone sharper than intended. "You think I don't know what it feels like to lose someone? My dad left when I was a kid, and Mom passed away years ago. I'm not losing you too. Not if I can help it." His outburst caught Caliph off guard. For a moment, she simply stared at him, her glowing eyes reflecting a mix of surprise and affection. Owen wasn't sure, but whatever it was softened the edges of her usual stoicism. "Very well," she said finally. "We will explore other options, but time is short. The hunters will regroup and strike again soon." Over the next few days, Owen threw himself into finding alternatives to destroying Caliph's ship. With the help of Mrs. Hargrove, Jake, and a few other volunteers, they scoured the wreckage for usable parts and brainstormed ways to adapt human technology to aid in repairs. Progress was slow, and setbacks were frequent, but Owen refused to give up. Meanwhile, Caliph worked tirelessly to fortify the town's defenses further, teaching the volunteers advanced combat techniques and setting additional traps in the surrounding woods. Despite her outward focus, Owen noticed subtle changes in her demeanor, moments of hesitation, fleeting glances in his direction that suggested she was wrestling with decisions she hadn't yet shared. One night, as they sat together under the stars, Owen decided to confront her. "You're planning something, aren't you?" he asked bluntly. Caliph didn't deny it. Instead, she turned to face him, her expression serious. "If repairing this ship proves impossible, I will activate the failsafe. It is the only way to guarantee your safety, and the safety of this town." "And what about you?" Owen demanded, frustration creeping into his voice. "What happens to you after that?" "I will find refuge elsewhere," she replied calmly. "Earth is vast. There are places where I can disappear, live unseen." "That's not living. It's surviving," Owen countered. "And besides, what about the prophecy? What about us?" Caliph's gaze softened, and for a moment, Owen saw the vulnerability beneath her warrior exterior. "Prophecies are fragile things, Owen. They often demand sacrifices we cannot foresee. Perhaps our bond was never meant to last beyond this moment." Her words stung, but Owen refused to let her push him away. "Then maybe it's time we stopped letting fate decide everything for us," he said fiercely. "Maybe it's time we took control, for once." Before Caliph could respond, a distant rumble echoed through the night. Both froze, exchanging a glance filled with dread. The hunters had returned. The second attack was even fiercer than the first. The rogue Valari descended upon Willow Creek with renewed ferocity, their numbers bolstered by reinforcements. This time, they bypassed the outer defenses entirely, focusing their efforts on the heart of the town and Caliph's ship. As chaos erupted around them, Owen and Caliph fought side by side, their movements synchronized as if guided by instinct alone. Yet despite their best efforts, the hunters overwhelmed them, forcing them to retreat toward the ship. "We have no choice," Caliph shouted over the din of battle. "Activate the failsafe." "No," Owen yelled back, grabbing her arm. "Not yet. Trust me." Summoning every ounce of courage he possessed, Owen reached out mentally, strengthening the resonance link between them. He poured his energy into Caliph, amplifying her abilities just as he'd done during the previous battle. The effect was immediate. Her weapon surged with power, emitting a blinding burst of energy that sent the hunters reeling. Seizing the opportunity, Caliph led a final charge, driving the invaders back into the woods. When the dust settled, the townsfolk emerged from hiding, cheering and embracing one another in relief. But Owen and Caliph stood apart, their breathing ragged, their faces grim. "The ship is beyond repair," Caliph said finally, surveying the wreckage. "It cannot take me home." Owen nodded, swallowing hard. "Then you'll stay with me. Here." Caliph studied him for a long moment, her glowing eyes reflecting the flickering torchlight. Then, ever so slightly, she smiled. "Very well," she said softly. "Together, then." As dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden rays across the battered but resilient town, Owen realized something profound. In defending Willow Creek, he hadn't just protected his home. He'd found a new kind of family. And standing beside Caliph, he knew they weren't done yet. Whatever trials lay ahead, they would face them together, not as lone warriors, but as part of something far bigger than either of them could have imagined. The weeks following the hunters' second attack passed in a haze of rebuilding and reflection. Willow Creek slowly returned to its quiet rhythm, though scars, both physical and emotional, remained etched into the landscape and its people. The townsfolk worked tirelessly to repair damaged homes, replant ruined crops, and heal wounds inflicted by the battle. Yet despite the challenges, there was an undeniable sense of unity among them, a bond forged in the crucible of shared adversity. For Owen, life took on a new dimension. With Keleth now permanently staying in Willow Creek, he found himself navigating uncharted territory, not just as her protector, but as her partner. Their relationship had evolved beyond mere compatibility. It had grown into something deeper, something neither of them could have anticipated when they first met. Keleth adjusted to Earth life with surprising grace. Though she remained vigilant, always scanning the horizon for signs of trouble, she also embraced the simplicity of human existence. She marveled at mundane things like sunsets, rainstorms, and the laughter of children playing in the fields. To her, these moments held a beauty and fragility that contrasted sharply with the harsh realities of her own world. Owen introduced her to small pleasures he'd long taken for granted, like sipping coffee on the porch or tending to the vegetable garden behind his house. In return, Keleth taught him more about her people, sharing stories of their history, culture, and struggles. Through her eyes, Owen began to see Earth and humanity in a different light, recognizing both its strengths and vulnerabilities. One crisp autumn morning, Owen woke early to find Keleth already outside, kneeling beside the garden. Her armor was gone, replaced by simple clothes borrowed from one of the townsfolk. Dirt smudged her hands as she carefully tended to a row of tomato plants, her glowing eyes focused intently on the task. "You're getting good at this," Owen teased, stepping out onto the porch with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Keleth glanced up, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Your species has much to teach about resilience," she said, accepting the mud he offered. "These plants remind me of you, rooted firmly in the soil yet reaching toward the sky." Owen chuckled, sitting down beside her. "That's poetic for someone who claims not to understand humans." "It is merely observation," Keleth replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. After a pause, she added softly, "Thank you, Owen, for everything." He nodded, knowing she wasn't just thanking him for the coffee, or even for helping her stay safe. It was gratitude for something far greater: trust, acceptance, and the chance to start anew. As word spread about Keleth's decision to remain in Willow Creek, the townsfolk welcomed her with open arms. At first, some were wary of her alien presence, but Keleth quickly earned their respect through her actions. Using her advanced knowledge, she helped improve local agriculture, introducing techniques that increased crop yields and reduced waste. She also assisted Mrs. Hargrove in upgrading her hardware store, retrofitting old tools with modifications inspired by Valeri technology. Children flocked to her, fascinated by her glowing eyes and diminutive stature. To them, she wasn't a warrior or an outsider. She was simply Keleth, the friendly guardian who told captivating stories about stars and planets beyond their wildest imaginations. Even Tommy Briggs, the mischievous teenager, became her unofficial apprentice, eagerly learning how to maintain and adapt her remaining equipment. Yet despite her growing popularity, Keleth never forgot why she had come to Earth, or the threats that still loomed in the distance. Every evening, she climbed to the highest hill overlooking the town, scanning the horizon for any sign of the rogue Valeri hunters. Though months had passed without incident, she knew they hadn't given up. They would return eventually, stronger and more determined than before. But for now, peace prevailed, and Keleth intended to make the most of it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Owen joined Keleth on her customary hilltop vigil. They sat side by side in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky. "What happens if they do come back?" Owen asked after a while, breaking the quiet. Keleth didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but tinged with resolve. "We will face them, as we always have, together." Owen nodded, reassured by her confidence. "And what about the prophecy? Do you still believe in it?" Keleth tilted her head slightly, considering the question. "Perhaps the prophecy was never about destiny," she said thoughtfully. "Perhaps it was about choice. The choices we make, the bonds we forge, and the paths we walk together. Her words resonated deeply with Owen, echoing truths he'd come to realize over the past months. Fate might have brought them together, but it was their decisions and sacrifices that had kept them united. "You know," Owen said after a moment, smiling faintly, "for someone who claims not to understand emotions, you sure have a way with words." Calith raised an eyebrow, her expression mock serious. "I learned from the best." They shared a laugh, the sound mingling with the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. For the first time in what felt like forever, Owen felt truly at peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them head-on, with courage, determination, and each other. Months turned into years, and Willow Creek flourished under the unlikely partnership between a human mechanic and an alien warrior. Calith became a beloved figure in the community, her presence symbolizing hope and resilience. Owen, too, grew into his role as her companion, finding purpose in ways he'd never imagined possible. Though the threat of the rogue Valerie hunters lingered on the edges of their consciousness, it no longer defined their lives. Instead, they focused on building a future, one rooted in trust, love, and the belief that even the smallest lights could shine brightly against the darkest skies. As they stood together one evening, watching the sunset paint the horizon in fiery brilliance, Calith placed a hand on Owen's shoulder, a silent promise of unity and hope. Together, they represented a bridge between two worlds, proving that even the most unlikely bonds could change the course of destiny. And so, under the vast expanse of stars, Owen Harper and Calith faced the unknown, not as strangers bound by fate, but as partners united by choice. Whatever lay ahead, they would meet it together, forging a legacy that transcended galaxies and generations alike.